Fines are a common thing in football. Every now and again, players, fans, staff, even whole clubs get fined because they flouted a rule or another. But sometimes the fines have been just funny, bizarre, or just outright ridiculous. Here's 10 of the most ridiculous fines in football history. At number 10, we have the fine that was imposed on West Ham defender Kurt Zouma. Earlier this year, a video of Zouma abusing his cat hit the internet, and I'll be honest with you, it was straight up one of the most diabolical things I'd ever seen. He definitely deserved to be punished. But Zouma received the highest fine possible, and I'm not so sure how I feel about that. Fining him the highest amount possible would suggest that that's the absolute worst thing a person can do, and I don't really know about that, but let me know what you think about this one in the comments. I guess it's debatable, so what do you think? Anyway, number 9 isn't as debatable. It was straight up ridiculous, and actually, it was so funny. You remember how football was in 2020, right? After the peak of the pandemic, football slowly started to resume, but fans weren't allowed in the stadiums. If you remember, many clubs tried to make up for the absence of fans. Some did it with sound effects to make it seem like the stadium was full, and some did it with Zoom calls and big screens in the stadium. But a football club in South Korea decided to get a little more creative with theirs, only that creativity turned out to be more like depravity. And to make it look like there were fans in the stadium, FC Seoul positioned 30 mannequins in the stands. Mannequins. What's wrong with that? If you look just a little more closely, you would see that those mannequins were actually sex dolls. Those guys put sex dolls in the stands, and their defense was they didn't know. Come on, man. Dude, how wouldn't you know? Some of those mannequins, were even holding up signs advertising porn sites. But you didn't know? Okay. And you know what made this even worse? Pornography is banned in South Korea. So, as you would expect, FC Seoul got heavily fined. They were asked to pay 100 million won, which is equivalent to 66,500 pounds. Honestly, this fine was well deserved, but the reason behind it is what made it absolutely ridiculous. Anyway, number 8 is just all around ridiculous. And guess who issued this one? None other than the legendary Man United boss, Sir Alex Ferguson. And this time, he hadn't yet made that move to Manchester, though, so this was a long time ago. He was head coach at Aberdeen back in 1983, and he was known to be a really tough boss while he was there. So tough that he once fined John Hewitt for, let me double check to confirm I'm reading this right. Yeah, for overtaking him on the road on their way to training. Now, I'm not very sure what got Fergie mad, because Hewitt wasn't even speeding. Was it the fact that the other players in the car waved at him while John overtook? Or did he just find it disrespectful that his players overtook his car on the road? Either way, I really can't understand it. But immediately when Fergie got back and saw Hewitt, he hurled insults at him and capped his tirade with a 20-pound fine. One word. Ridiculous. Now, number 7 is another absolutely ridiculous fine imposed by a coach, and this one just looks like something Pep Guardiola can do. So, long ago, Brian Clough was coach of Nottingham Forest, and he was pretty much a perfectionist. He had a certain way he wanted his players to play, and he was always very dogged about it. You stray, you risk a fine. And the Nottingham players probably thought that was a joke until he actually fined Kenny Burns for misplacing a pass. The defender passed the ball across his own box, and Clough was infuriated. He was so mad, his player made a mistake that he couldn't even wait till the end of the game to fine him. Kenny got his 50-pound fine by halftime. Now, tell me you don't think Pep can do something like this. Speaking of Pep, there's a certain English star the Spaniard refused to give a chance at City. You know who that is? Of course, Jadon Sancho. Now, Sancho is our recipient of the number 6 most ridiculous fine in football history. This was in 2020 when, We were to minimize human contact as much as possible. But the German Football League found the Englishman guilty of violating COVID protocols and fined him a whopping €10,000. Was he partying? Was he in a large crowd? No. He was in his home getting a haircut. The problem the German football authorities had with the picture that made it to the internet was that neither Sancho nor his barber had a mask on, so they thought €10,000 was a reasonable fine for that. The former Dortmund star found the fine so ridiculous, they went on Twitter and wrote "absolute joke DFL." He deleted the tweet not so long after, I guess to avoid any further trouble. But if you think that $10,000 fine was ridiculous, come take a look at an even more ridiculous $10,000 fine in number 5. So, let me begin here. If you didn't know, referees have their special bathrooms in stadiums. And as Robbie Savage found out in a Premier League game back in 2002, it's taboo for football players to use those bathrooms. So, the story is that Savage, who was playing for Leicester City at the time, had an upset stomach, and so really had to go number 2 right before a Premier League game. The referee's private toilet was the closet, so he just quickly used it. No issue there, right? Well, not to Graham Poll, who was the ref that day. It was so big an issue for him that he reported it to the FA. Oh yeah, he did. And well, the FA too found it disrespectful, or maybe they thought it was a prank on the ref, so they slapped Savage with a £10,000 fine. Whew, that was some real expensive shit. You know what else is real expensive? The car Koeman pulled up in that earned him the number 4 most ridiculous fine in football history. Apparently, it's in the contract that Bayern players and staff that they're not allowed to show up to training, games, or other club events in any car that's not an Audi. The German car manufacturing company has a sponsorship deal with the Bavarian club, so I guess that makes sense. But since I found out about this rule, I was always curious about how the club would react if a player drove a car not manufactured by Audi to work. And thank God for Kingsley Coman, because he showed me exactly how. In 2021, the fast winger pulled up to training in a fast car that wasn't manufactured by Audi, a Mercedes McLaren. His reason was that his Audi had a broken side mirror. But the Bayern authorities didn't care about that. First of all, the security team didn't even let him into the property, so he had to park his expensive McLaren out by the roadside. But that wasn't all. The club went further to hand the Frenchman a €50,000 fine for flouting their rules. That's someone's salary, dude. Well, I guess Koeman will just have to add that to the cost of maintenance for his expensive automobile. Now, from something expensive to something so ridiculously cheap. We've seen players get fined $10,000, $50,000, even $250,000 so far. But at number 3, we have a whole club being fined just €300. Back in 2019, Barcelona were accused of being a little shady in their signing of Griezmann. Apparently, they started negotiations with the Atletico Madrid player when he had a release clause of €200 million, but then waited till it dropped to $120 million before they triggered it. Atletico Madrid reported the Catalan club and Barcelona were indeed found guilty. So what was their punishment? They were to pay a fine of just €300. No, I didn't mean €300,000. The club that just paid €120 million for a player was fined €300 for tapping out. How hilariously ridiculous. Now, I mean, you'll expect the Camp Nou club to just pay the fine and laugh in Atletico's face. But no, they went ahead to appeal the fine. Come on, man. No way that appeal process didn't cost more than the fine itself. If people are being fined for bad behavior, you'll naturally expect Mario Balotelli to feature. And he does. He's at number 2. More than a decade ago, the Italian striker thought it would be a fun game to throw darts at, human beings. Who gave him that brilliant idea? Have you seen the way darts stab into those boards? Why would he even think to throw them at people? Well, he was fined £100,000 for that, and rightly so. The fine was very much deserved. The act that warranted the fine was the ridiculous thing here. Like, what was going through his head? Now to number 1. Nicklas Bendtner scored 2 of Denmark's goals when they faced off against Portugal in the group stage of Euro 2012. And UEFA couldn't stand the way he celebrated his 80th minute equalizer that had attracted a pretty hefty fine. The Danish striker got at the end of a pretty sweet cross, and while he ran off to celebrate, he slightly pulled his shorts down and raised his shirt to reveal his briefs, which had Paddy Power printed on the band. UEFA weren't happy with the ambush marketing, so they slapped him with a €100,000 fine. That was ridiculous, man. If I'm just being honest with you, that's absolutely crazy. And to show you how ridiculous it was, the same UEFA who fined Bendtner $100,000 for flashing his underwear, a few days later, fined the Croatian FA $80,000 for racist chants from their fans during a game. I'm telling you, both fines were just a few days apart. So UEFA is basically saying that ambush marketing is worse than racism. It's just ridiculous. Anyway, speaking of Bendtner, do you know that the former Arsenal man has an unbreakable record to his name? You don't believe me? Click on that video in the middle of your screen. You'll see Bendtner and other football players with unbreakable records. Trust me, you'll love this one. Go watch it. Go!